Today on the official Marvel podcast, we're joined by head of streaming, television, and animation at Marvel Studios, Brad Winderbaum, to give us the latest in Marvel animation and Marvel television.
There's so much on the page in the comics, in the source material. It's almost a century old, and still there are characters and themes and events that we revisit.
Plus, we've got a spectacular lineup featuring everyone's favorite star-spangled man with a plan, Captain America, as we explore the Captains America of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, John Walker, and super soldier Isaiah Bradley.
And we'll even dig into some of the lesser-known Captains America from the comics. And let me just tell you now, there are so many interesting people who have picked up the shield throughout Marvel Comics history. I'm Raylo.
And I'm Nick Carrillo, and this is the official Marvel podcast.
Last week on the show, we were joined by President of Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, who gave us a state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And today, we have Brad Winderbaum, who is the head of streaming, television, and animation at Marvel Studios, to talk to us about all things Marvel animation and Marvel television. Now, Brad has been with Marvel Studios since the early days, all the way back to the first Iron Man movie. And he even spearheaded the Marvel One-Shot program, where he was the executive producer for shorts like Item 47, Agent Carter, and one of my favorite projects, All Hail the King.
Brad recently sat down to chat with member of the official Marvel podcast family, Ellie Pyle.
Hi, I'm Ellie Pyle, and I'm here with Brad Winderbaum from Marvel Studios to talk about all things Marvel TV, animation, and starting with the X-Men. So talk to me about those early days of Marvel Studios' forays into live action television and animation with WandaVision and What If. How did all of that kind of come about and then evolve?
So we were a film studio. I was trained as a film producer. And when Disney Plus, was just a twinkle in their eye, we were asked to do something we'd never done before, which is make television shows. And our first live action show was WandaVision, which was incredible and a love letter to TV and kind of, I think, proclaimed why Marvel wanted to make television in an amazing way. And then our first animated show was What If? And this was a show that only could be done in animation because you could never get those actors back. You could never get those sets back all in one place. So that opened the door to animation for us. And I was trained on how to make an animated show by Brian Andrews and AC Bradley. And in success, it opened the door to more animation.
So a bunch of creative talents have worked on multiple Marvel Studios projects. You mentioned Brian Andrews, who directed What If, and AC Bradley, who was the head writer. What keeps the frequent collaborators coming back for more?
I think that it's the legacy of the characters, probably more than anything else. It's the same reason we're all here. There's so much on the page in the comics, in the source material. It's almost a century old. And still, there are characters and themes and events that we revisit. And I think just as a creator and something that many of the filmmakers we've worked with feel is inspired to continue the legacy that Marvel represents.
One of the things we're excited to chat with you about today is X-Men 97. Were you a fan of X-Men the Animated Series from the 90s?
I sure was. I remember very clearly coming home after school, 3:30, X-Men the Animated Series. Usually I would just eat half a box of cereal on the TV.
X-Men the Animated Series is a big part of my Marvel origin story too. So I am right there with you. What was it like revisiting that series and modernizing it for a new audience?
It was like a dream come true. I started collecting the X-Men comics because I watched the animated show, which then led to Marvel Comics in general. And it was the first serialized piece of content that I ever watched. I mean, it was every episode was to be continued. That was mind-blowing for a young kid. But really probably the biggest impact it had on me was it dealt with themes that were only in my head. It was a kid's show, but it met me where I was at. It didn't talk down to me. It held a mirror up to the world and gave me an outlet to be able to kind of formulate some of these opinions I had. And that's something that I think this medium can do really, really well. It's not about a message, it's about a conversation. And X-Men always has But certainly that animated series gave people the ability to talk about things.
Yeah, and to have those conversations evolve. With X-Men 97, anything there that you think people should keep an eye out for as they've just finished watching it, they're going back to watch again?
It's we got big plans for the second season. I've already seen all the animatics. We're well on our way to creating something that hits the heights of the first season. I know the first season is an emotional ride. That ride continues in a very X-Men fashion in the second season.
So there's a killer slate of projects in the next few years. On the animation side, you've got your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, Marvel Zombies, Eyes of Wakanda, and What If Season 3. Any updates or teases you want to give us about those shows?
Yeah. What If Season 3? I'll start there. It feels like the completion of a trilogy. It takes us to places that you'd never expect. It goes beyond the first two seasons and its exploration of the multiverse, and it pulls in characters that are very unexpected and has what I think is an extremely moving and fulfilling culmination for Uatu, the Watcher. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, this is Peter Parker in high school. There are twists and turns in that show that are amazing, but the real power of your friendly neighborhood is the ensemble, is the neighborhood. The showrunner is Jeff Trammell, who made a show called Craig of the Creek, which was a kid's cartoon that spent seasons in the connected backyards of this neighborhood and had a whole mythology that grew out of it and characters you really grew to care for over the course of the series. He has amped that up in such a major way, playing with characters like not just Peter Parker, but Nico Minoru, Lonnie Lincoln, who's my personal favorite, and Harry Osborn and others that kind of flesh out this teenage ensemble. It's really, really incredible.
So Wakanda is a huge fan favorite. Is there anything you want to tell us about the upcoming Eyes of Wakanda and how you plan on expanding the world of Black Panther?
Sure. Eyes of Wakanda, more than any other show we're doing in animation, ties directly into the MCU. This is a story about Wakandan history. It's produced by Ryan Coogler, directed by Todd Harris, who is one of our longtime storyboard artists who's, I first met when he designed the Hulk versus Thor fight in Ragnarok. It's an awesome show. The action's insane. The storytelling's fantastic. It's both about the history of Wakanda, but it also expands into the greater MCU at different time periods. So if you're a fan of the movies, I think this show is going to be a real treat.
And on the live action front, we've got Agatha coming and closest to my heart, Daredevil Born Again. Can you give us any updates on those shows?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Agatha it's really fun, but it's really scary and it gets quite dramatic. She's an amazing anti-hero, and that show is it lures you in with the fun of Halloween, and before you know it, you're crying. And so I'll put it to you that way.
What kind of scary are we talking about here?
It's a Marvel brand of scary. It's a Halloween show. There are deadly stakes in this series. It's a fun ride, but it's a dangerous one.
Looking forward to that. And how about Daredevil?
Well, Daredevil is incredible. It's similar in some ways to X-Men 97 because it's reviving something that the fans love, but it is taking it in a new direction. These characters have matured. The universe is different than it was. Things have changed. Society's changed. Matt and Wilson have changed, and their characters are going to collide in ways we've never seen before. It's no longer enough to try to murder each other. There's a whole game of politics at play.
Cannot wait. With so much Marvel Studios goodness to look forward to, what are you most looking forward to sharing with fans?
There's a lot of surprises around the bend, and I can't choose a favorite, but I'm very excited for people to see what we've done with Marvel Zombies.
I'm looking forward to that as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Brad Winderbaum for joining us. And how about those updates? I'm personally excited for Agatha All Along because I really like spooky things and Halloween is my favorite holiday. So I am pumped for that. Can it be September 18th already?
Listen, I've been listening to that Agatha All Along song on repeat, so it can't come soon enough. Meanwhile, I am so psyched for Eyes of Wakanda, just to see all the unique ways they explore vibranium and delve into its uses. And Ryan Coogler, who directed the live-action Black Panther films, he's back again to be a part of the creative process for this, and I cannot wait to see all the magic that he creates.
Oh, I cannot agree more. I love what he's done with that world. But we've got a ton to look forward to in the future. However, this week here in the US, we're celebrating Independence Day, and so we thought it'd be a great chance for us to take a look at our favorite Star-Spangled Avenger, Captain America.
Yes, and to start things off, I've got a quick recap for you featuring the adventures of Captain America throughout the MCU.
I understood that reference.
We're here to catch you up on everyone who's ever been called Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even if the only thing you know about Cap is the internet's favorite nickname.
That is America's ass.
Now, in Marvel Studios' Captain America, the First Avenger, we meet this scrawny kid from Brooklyn named Steve Rogers. It's 1942, and Steve's mission in life is to join the U.S. military to fight in World War II. Steve has a lot of reasons to want to enlist. His best friend Bucky Barnes has already joined up, and as he puts it,
I don't like bullies.
because of a laundry list of health problems, he's turned away by military recruiters over and over again. But Steve isn't one to give up. In fact, he coins what would later become his famous catchphrase in an alley fight with a classic bully.
You just don't know when to give up, do you?
I can do this all day.
One night, Bucky and Steve go to a fair called the World Exposition of Tomorrow, where Steve tries, once again, to enlist.
Well, it's a fair. I'm going to try my luck.
A scientist working with the military named Dr. Abraham Erskine sees something unique in our hero. With Erskine's help, Steve finally gets his wish and joins the Strategic Scientific Reserve, where he meets an agent named Peggy Carter. He soon learns that this unit's mission is to develop a battalion of super soldiers using an experimental serum, and that he's been chosen as the first test subject.
The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great, bad becomes worse. This is why you were chosen. Because the strong man who has known power all his life may lose respect for that power, but a weak man knows the value of strength and knows compassion.
On the way to the procedure, Steve and Peggy have a really sweet conversation, even if it is a little awkward.
You have no idea how to talk to a woman, do you?
The procedure goes forward with some help from millionaire inventor Howard Stark. Yep, Iron Man's dad. And it's extremely successful. Steve comes out of a very scientific-looking chamber, about a foot taller and immeasurably stronger. The group celebrates briefly before realizing they're in the presence of an undercover agent of Hydra, the Nazi Science and Research Division. The agent triggers an explosion, kills Erskine, and steals a vial of super soldier serum. Steve catches the agent, but without Erskine, the super soldier project is shut down, and Steve is sent to work for the USO, selling defense bonds and performing in patriotic road shows and commercials. It's definitely not the type of service to his country that Steve had in mind. During an embarrassing trip overseas to perform for combat soldiers, Steve learns that Bucky's unit has been captured by Hydra, and so he, Peggy, and Howard go on a rogue mission to save them.
As soon as I'm free, turn this thing around and get the hell out of here!
You can't give me orders!
The hell I can't! I'm a captain!
Steve crosses paths with Hydra leader Red Skull, but he successfully rescues Bucky's unit. After rescuing nearly 400 men, Steve returns to Peggy at the army base. Bucky and a handful of other rescued soldiers form the Howling Commandos, a ragtag group of soldiers that Captain America leads on special missions against Hydra and Red Skull.
You ready to follow Captain America into the jaws of death?
Hell no. That little guy from Brooklyn who was too dumb not to run away from a fight. I'm following him.
Howard outfits Steve with a star-spangled vibranium shield, which becomes both an iconic symbol and a staple of Cap's fighting style. After many successful missions, as the Howling Commandos are getting closer to defeating Red Skull, Bucky falls from a moving train hundreds of feet into an icy ravine. Steve is devastated, and he blames himself.
I'm not gonna stop till all of Hydra's dead or captured.
You won't be alone.
Steve leads a major battle against Hydra, who is planning to launch explosives at several major cities across the world. The Howling Commandos stop the bombs, but Red Skull gets away with a very powerful mystical item called the Tesseract. Steve manages to get into Red Skull's plane, and an incredible mid-air fight ensues.
You don't give up, do you? Nope.
At the climax of the fight, Red Skull grabs the Tesseract and in an explosion of cosmic energy, disappears into thin air. The good news is Steve won. Red Skull is gone and the Tesseract has fallen into the middle of the ocean, but the bad news is the plane is too compromised to fly or land, and it's loaded with bombs and headed straight for New York. Our friend Steve makes the heartbreaking decision to sacrifice himself and crash the plane in the Arctic so it can't hurt anyone.
Maggie.
I'm here.
You're gonna need a rain check on that dance.
When we next see Steve, he's waking up in New York City in the year 2011. SHIELD, an American counterterrorism and intelligence agency, has rescued and revived him. And from here, he joins the Avengers Initiative.
Avengers!
Assemble.
The next few years are really eventful for Steve and his superpowered friends. He rescues New York from a space god and an army of aliens. He learns that Bucky is alive and is now a brainwashed assassin known as the Winter Soldier. He exposes a major Hydra infiltration among the ranks of SHIELD, and he meets an Air Force veteran named Sam Wilson, who later becomes an Avenger known as the Falcon. Steve saves the world over and over again during his time with the Avengers, all the while knowing that he missed out on the life he hoped for with Peggy back in 1942. Finally, Cap gets called into the ultimate battle. The Avengers get together to defeat Thanos, an intergalactic warlord who's trying to eliminate half of all life in the universe. And after a harrowing battle, the good guys, well, they lose. Thanos succeeds, and billions of people, including about half of the Avengers, are snapped out of existence. And if you thought Steve was devastated when he lost Bucky the first time, the second time is even worse as he loses Bucky and Sam, along with a bunch of other Avengers and friends. It takes years, but the remaining Avengers find a way to use time travel to bring everyone back. That time travel left a lot of loose ends in the past, so Steve volunteers to go back in time to tie them up. He's supposed to return immediately, but he doesn't. Instead, after completing his mission, he goes back to 1942 to get his girl. Steve returns as an old man, having lived out the life he always wanted with Peggy. He greets Sam with the iconic Captain America shield, passing the mantle to the next Captain America.
How does it feel?
Like it's someone else's.
It isn't.
This is effectively Steve's retirement. He hands off the shield to the best man for the job. But Sam decides to continue as the Falcon. He doesn't believe anyone should carry Cap's shield or name, and he donates the shield to the Smithsonian. The government almost immediately hands it to an army captain named John Walker, who seems a little off and probably wouldn't have been Steve Rogers' second choice.
I am Captain America.
While John is excessive forcing his way through an international terrorism investigation, Sam teams up with Bucky to try to find a peaceful solution. John manages to get his hands on a vial of super soldier serum and takes it, resulting in him going on a murderous rampage and losing the shield and the title in the process. After seeing what has become of John, Sam visits a super soldier who's been living under the radar for years, an elderly Black veteran named Isaiah Bradley. Isaiah was part of a brutal super soldier experiment in the 1940s. He was experimented on and jailed for years.
They will never let a Black man be Captain America. And even if they did, no self-respecting Black man would ever want to be.
Sam knows Isaiah has a right to be angry and cynical, but he ultimately decides that Captain America's fight is worth fighting. And so Sam takes up the mantle and the shield just in time to have a helicopter battle over the East River in New York.
Yeah. That's the Black Falcon there, I tell you.
Nah. That's Captain America.
Sam isn't just a great Captain America because he's tough. In the final battle of Marvel Studios, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he refuses to fight back. Instead, he tries to appeal to the humanity of his enemy.
The only power I have is that I believe we can do better.
And Sam's story isn't over. There are many more heroic adventures to come for Sam Wilson as the brave, just, and compassionate Captain America in the upcoming Captain America: Brave New World. You can watch Marvel Studios' Captain America: The First Avenger, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Avengers: Endgame, and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney+, along with the rest of the Avengers saga.
Wow, I forgot how much has happened in the MCU already.
So much and so many storylines, and we've only covered the Captain America side of things.
True. But while you only talked about the different Captains America from the cinematic universe, did you know that in the comics there are even more captains out there? Don't worry if this is news to you, because we've got you covered. Between the first appearance of Steve Rogers as Captain America in 1941 and the modern era of Captain America comics today, we've seen several incarnations of the Star-Spangled Man. And it's worth noting how complex the legacy of the Captain America identity really is. If you're going to wear that red, white, and blue uniform, it's not enough to just save the world from bad guys. You also have to live up to a higher set of ideals. And in the comic book history of the character, there have been plenty of contenders who couldn't quite reach the high bar set by Steve Rogers, and even some who stepped into the costume with bad intentions from day one.
In this segment, we're going to explore some of the lesser-known Captains America throughout over 80 years of Captain America's comic book history. We're going to start with the three individuals who stepped up to the plate after Steve plummeted into the Atlantic Ocean during what was believed to be Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes' final mission towards the end of World War II.
And now, we all know that Steve would be found decades later and revived by the Avengers. But just because Steve Rogers was in suspended animation for nearly 20 years, it didn't mean the world was left without a Captain America.
In fact, when Captain America and his partner and best friend Bucky Barnes were presumed dead, President Harry Truman secretly selected an individual to serve as the new Captain America to preserve American morale. His name? William Naslund.
Some background on Naslund. He was a library researcher turned Royal Air Force pilot for Great Britain. However, after a wound grounded Naslund, he was honorably discharged, returned to the USA, and became the Spirit of 76, a costume hero inspired by Captain America.
Even though President Truman then enlisted him to become the second Captain America, William Naslund wasn't enhanced by a super soldier serum like his predecessor. But he was an exceptional athlete and hand-to-hand combatant, and he wielded a steel shield with nearly as much dexterity as Steve Rogers himself.
Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. He wouldn't last as Cap for long, as Naslund, along with a few other World War II superheroes, went on a rescue mission to prevent the assassination of a young Senator John F. Kennedy in 1946. This would be William Naslund's final mission as he met his fate in action. It was then that the shield was picked up by a new Captain America, Jeffrey Mace.
Now, long before Mace stepped up as the next Captain America, he was a humor-loving reporter who was also inspired by the original Captain America, so much so that he even wore his own patriotic costume under his street clothes after Captain America debuted.
And he didn't just wear it because he was a Cap superfan, but because he was just eagerly waiting for his heroic moment. You know, a moment when he could shed his civilian identity and jump into action.
And it actually worked. While accompanying government officials to a munitions plant strike, their plane was hijacked by Axis operatives. Mace debuted as the Patriot, defeated them, and even managed to land the plane.
His public victory, combined with government support, won the Patriot instant fame. And so during that fateful mission to prevent the assassination of JFK, after William Naslund died fighting in his Captain America identity, Jeffrey Mace knew he had to retire his Patriot identity to become the new Cap.
Jeffrey Mace was Captain America until about 1949, when he ultimately decided that a symbolic hero was no longer necessary. So he retired the tights in exchange for decades of a normal life.
That led us to the third Captain America before the revival of Steve Rogers, the Captain America of the 1950s, William Burnside. And let's just say there's a reason why he's known as the bad Cap to some longtime comic book fans.
As a kid, William Burnside was a Steve Rogers superfan. He followed reports of Cap's adventures, joined Cap's fan club, the Sentinels of Liberty, and even got his PhD in American history writing his thesis on Captain America.
That's not even the weirdest part. He even legally changed his name to Steve Rogers and underwent surgery to change his face and vocal cords to look and sound just like Steve. That's dedication.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, who'd make this man Captain America? He sounds like a creep, and you'd be right. So much so that when William Burnside discovered a file detailing the super serum used to transform the original Captain America, he brought it to the US government and was denied when he asked that they turn him into a super soldier in exchange for the serum's secrets.
So, what did this man do? What any crazed superfan would do: keep the serum for himself in a pent-up and petty rage of resentment.
Comics are so relatable, it's just like me. And if it didn't help after all this, in his capacity as a high school history teacher, he was consistently confronted with the growing belief among his students that Captain America had an exaggerated reputation. Some even believe that Captain America never existed at all.
And so, when a totally different communist version of the villain known as the Red Skull surfaced, Burnside injected himself with the super serum and took on the identity of Captain America, thwarting the Skull in a high-profile battle.
This led the FBI and other government agencies to work closely with this new Captain America to fight off communist threats. However, unlike the original Captain America, the effects of an unstable serum drove him insane.
That insanity, mixed with his already zealous anti-communist vigilance, devolved into paranoid racism, leading him to attacking innocent people over a series of months.
Yeesh. Well, by 1955, the US government was unable to persuade Burnside to undergo treatment, and they had had enough. So they captured Burnside and placed him in a top-secret, deep-freeze cryogenic hibernation until his madness could be cured.
Unfortunately, a cure was never found, and eventually Burnside would be forgotten for a time. That is until decades later, when Burnside was released and eventually became a fascist supervillain named the Grand Director. Luckily, the original Captain America, Steve Rogers, had been revived by this point and was able to put this man in his place.
With Steve Rogers unfrozen and fighting alongside the Avengers, Captain America would be solidified as one of the greatest heroes of the Marvel age. Though just because Steve Rogers was back didn't mean he was always Captain America.
For example, when Steve Rogers first quit as Captain America in the mid-70s after being disheartened by the US government, 3 more individuals stepped up.
Sure, except it didn't go well.
It did not. There was Bob Russo, who was a professional baseball player.
He quit after breaking his arm while swinging into a building during his first outing as Captain America.
and Scar Turpin, a motorcycle thug who loved Cap.
Great name, but he quit after his first mission trying to fight a gang and got beat up pretty badly.
And Roscoe, the manager of the gym where Steve Rogers trains.
Oh, I love Roscoe, though he teams up with the Falcon on his first mission and was murdered by the Red Skull.
Okay, true, but it is his death that convinces Steve Rogers to return as Captain America.
Yes, and he'd continue on as a successful Captain America until the 1980s. Though because this is comics and we crave drama with a capital D, Steve Rogers would once again hang up the shield, unwilling to risk compromising his ethics by working directly for politicians.
This paved the way for the ultra-violent and trigger-happy John Walker to pick up the Captain America mantle.
Right, and unlike his predecessors, John Walker did manage to get his hands on enhanced abilities like the original Captain America through a mysterious individual known as the Power Broker.
This guy was nothing like Steve Rogers, and even he eventually recognizes this and returns the costume and shield back to Steve, leading to John Walker to adopt his own alter ego, U.S. Agent.
But decades later, after Steve reclaims the mantle of Captain America and faces off against his fellow superhero peers during the events of Marvel's Civil War event series, Steve Rogers is assassinated under the direct order of the Red Skull, leaving the shield, though, to be passed on to his former sidekick and BFF, Bucky Barnes.
That's true! Bucky Barnes is alive! Initially, Bucky returned in the identity of the brainwashed assassin, the Winter Soldier, but when Bucky finally reunites with Steve Rogers only to lose him once again, he stepped right up and became the new Captain America to seek out revenge against the Red Skull.
Bucky would go on to fight alongside the Avengers and continued to carry the shield even after Steve Rogers returned from the dead because, well, comics. However, Bucky's past as the Winter Soldier would come back to haunt him, triggering a trial for treason.
While Bucky was dealing with legal troubles, as one does, Special Forces soldier Dave Rickford, arguing that the world still needed a Captain America, picked up the mantle and became Captain America for a short period.
Right, because Rickford was captured by the evil science organization known as AIM and had to be rescued by Steve Rogers. Rickford was convinced by Steve to give up the mantle afterwards, and in turn, he managed to convince Steve to once again return as Cap.
From there, Steve Rogers reclaimed the shield and became Captain America once more. But by this point in the Marvel Universe, the legacy of Captain America had inspired so many. His story in the modern day has far exceeded his time in World War II and has taken a life of its own.
Even after Sam Wilson served as the Cap's crime-fighting partner, the Falcon, and then took on duties of Captain America in absence of Steve Rogers, younger generations across the world had claimed the identity for themselves. While Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers mutually serve as Captain America these days, the United States of Captain America comic book series introduced readers to the Captain's Network. It's this underground organization of costume heroes that really expands the Captain America legacy to further represent the diverse American identities found throughout the country.
Whether that's Aaron Fisher, the Captain America of the Railways, Ariel Agbayani, the Campus Captain America, Joe Gomez, the Captain America of the Kickapoo tribe, or any others who are part of the Captain's Network, there's really a Captain America for everybody.
And that's just the Captain's America of the Earth 616 universe, aka the main Marvel universe. But if there's one thing to know about Captain America, it's that no matter who wields the shield, they fight for and represent America's strength and resilience.
And punch Nazis.
And punch Nazis. While we spent most of this week's episode talking about Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson, next week we'll be spending a little more time with the X-Men. If you're anything like me, you just watched or maybe even rewatched and cried and recried over Marvel Studios' X-Men 97. And so today we leave you with this X quote from Jubilee in X-Men 97's fourth episode titled Motendo Life Death Part 1. In it, avid gamer Jubilee finds herself trapped in a video game where she's confronted with a much older and wiser version of herself and receives some sage advice.
Living doesn't get cheat codes or extra lives, but it has friends and family, love, loss, and heapings of hope. Life's a total risk and it's on you. Take it.
If you haven't already, make sure to catch this episode as well as every episode of X-Men 97 streaming now on Disney+. But that's all from us today, and we will see you next time.
Next week on the official Marvel podcast, we'll be talking to director Jacob Castorena and executive producer Dana Vasquez Eberhardt about X-Men 97.
We take off right where season 5 ended with Graduation Day. You know, that's where the show ended. All those wonderful questions that I've had since childhood get to be answered.
In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find podcasts and tell a friend or 5 about us.
And while you're at it, be sure to rate and review the show. It really does help other Marvel fans out there find the podcast.
This episode of the official Marvel podcast was hosted by myself, Ray Lowe, and Nick Carrillo, featuring Ellie Pyle.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Isabel Robertson,
with help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development Brad Barton and Production Manager Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Cara McGurk Allison.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.